My name is Lasha, and I'm an e-learning manager with Lionbridge. You might find it interesting to note the definition of the word global. The Collins Dictionary defines global as an adjective to describe something that happens in all parts of the world or affects all parts of the world. The Oxford Dictionary puts it in a little more concise manner, where it defines global as covering or affecting the whole world. I'm sure you understand where we're going with this. Can something truly be created in such a way that it affects or impacts the whole world in the same way as it was intended for the original target audience? I know music does that, sometimes facial expressions too. But can the same be achieved through imagery and words? To put it in simple terms, localization or L10N is when a piece of content is converted to suit another country or audience. There are two key points here: accessibility and appeal or familiarity. Localization means to make your content accessible and appealing to all locales. If you work with any kind of content, be it to inform, to influence, or connect with your audiences, or even to teach or train in multiple countries and languages, you already know that localization is a huge part of being relevant in the market today, especially with how the pandemic has changed everything we do and how we consume content. Because it's easy to waste a lot of resources creating, managing, and sharing content that has no impact, or worse, has a detrimental effect because it's poorly targeted or badly written, shoddily translated, or not localized well. Before we dive deeper, it is important to understand the difference between localization and internationalization. Localization means adapting to meet the language, cultural, and other requirements of a specific target market or a locale. Internationalization consists of adapting the product or service and its design so that it is easy to localize. Don't worry, we'll come to examples for these. Now let's throw in translation into the mix. Translation takes content in one language and renders it to another. The objective here is to convey a near equivalent or closest meaning. I once sent a few files over to a Chinese client. 20 minutes later, I received an email saying, "Thank you for sharing the files, Lasha. I showed them to my boss and she was aroused." True story. My assumption is he used direct translation for the word excited, which was translated as aroused. Now, the term localization is often used as a synonym for translation, which it is not. Localization requires a complete rehaul of the core logic, visual design, representation to be effective in another culture and locale. Let's look at a few examples that were listed by Jenko. I'm not sure how many of you all remember seeing this ad. In the early 70s, Pepsi launched an international campaign with the slogan, "Come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation." While this was a huge success in the West, it backfired when the slogan was mistranslated during localization. In Chinese, the line was mistranslated to mean Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the dead. And in German, it translated to rise from the grave with Pepsi. Yikes. Some common other disasters you may have heard of are Electrolux's "Nothing Sucks Like an Electrolux," or KFC's "Finger Licking Good," which translated to mean "eat your fingers off," or HSBC's "Assume Nothing," where HSBC had to spend over $10 million to rebrand their "Assume Nothing" tagline, which was translated as "do nothing" in most languages. This rebranding gave birth to their slogan, "The World's Local Bank." Very clever, I thought. Today they use the slogan, "Together We Thrive," which represents their new global brand identity. What do you think are some of the common pitfalls you see in these examples? And how then can a brand, product, or service be truly localized? I think it's evident that marketing and localization teams must work more collaboratively for brands to survive and thrive as e commerce dominates consumer purchases. Here are a few great examples listed by SmartLink. The WWF site. Now, in order to engage viewers around the world, the WWF has put a lot of effort not just in translating their content, but also serving the right content to the right users. This means while the US version of the site provides a study on the declining monarch butterfly population, their Spanish page has a direct feature on Earth Hour. The WWF is able to provide a more compelling experience with your content that always feels fresh and relevant by highlighting the information that matters most to the readers in a specific region. Take Airbnb, for example. Airbnb is leveraging localization to add in an extra level of personalization to their experience. Perhaps one of the best examples today of a well-executed localization strategy is Netflix. This is a classic example of successful globalization and localization strategy. Netflix is able to capture such a vast global audience by allowing users worldwide to view subtitles in a language of their choice or choose a dubbed version of the show or movie. But localization doesn't end there for Netflix. They've even localized the app navigation and UI for different countries. They scale their UI design using a technique called pseudo-localization. This accounts for 25 plus languages and scripts. In pseudo-localization, the software assigns space for 1, 2, or more words after the standard English text. This is to account for increase in total characters required for different languages. Here's another interesting example: Nintendo. Nintendo is really unique in the sense that it offers a direct contrast to Netflix. Now, instead of tailoring content for their North American audiences and redesigning parts of their game or removing ideas that might be strange to Western players, Nintendo doubles down. Gaming is an odd market in that the investment of localization must really be worth the return. The resources involved in developing, translating, adapting, and testing games can be very intensive, with the end product not always delivering the experience gamers have come to expect. And that's the real challenge: providing gamers with an experience they were expecting, especially in contrast to the native beliefs of the game. They don't want to feel like they're playing a watered down version or westernized version of a game, but rather the appeal is in the original or unaltered version. Nintendo has instead developed a process where localization discussions occur as the game is being built and designed. Instead of completely developing the game and then localizing the finished product, Nintendo has a team of localization experts that translate games, create marketing content, film brand videos, and ultimately shepherd the delivery of the games onto the American shores. The idea is that with localization and development happening simultaneously, Nintendo can streamline the process and ensure consistency between both the native and the localized version of the game. Which brings me to what localization really means. Localization is the application of location-specific standards to your content, where your content could be digital marketing, could be a website, a product, a service, or anything else. Localization is the adaptation of a product or service to meet the needs of a particular language, culture, or desired population's look and feel. And a successfully localized service or product is one that appears to have been developed in the local culture. I'm sure you'd agree it's useless to simply replicate one content strategy in other regions. Often thought only as a synonym for translation of the user interface or the documentation, localization is far more complex and entails customizations related to text and graphics containing references to objects, actions, or ideas, which in a given culture may be subject to misinterpretation or simply viewed as insensitive. Even the layouts differ. Not all languages read left to right, and a lot more. How then should you approach your localization needs? Now, there are various localization standards and practices for quality assurance that you can follow for your localization needs. However, the question is, are these generic standards sufficient, or do we also need a customized global content strategy?